My name is Christian Hibbs. This is my Excel report. Um, as you can see, the first section, we studied Earth orbit, solar system, Andromeda, galaxy, Milky Way orbit. We were studying speeds, but what we learned is that they're completely relative. Um, the best example I could give is I'm moving 0 miles per hour right now. If I was at the equator, sitting in a chair like I am now or couch, you could say I'm moving 0 miles per hour. Well, near the equator, I am technically moving at 1,000 miles per hour due to Earth's orbit. So am I 0 miles per hour or am I 1,000 miles per hour? So that's an interesting point. All the speeds and orbits and gravitational pulls that we measure throughout math and science, all of those comparisons are relative because they're being compared to something else. We also studied this scale of the universe, which was very interesting. I thought that the most interesting thing was the Japanese spider crab. As you can see, it's larger than a human, which is kind of crazy. And these are the biggest crustaceans on Earth. So that was definitely the most interesting thing I thought that was in the scale of the universe. Number 2 was my favorite section besides number 6. Number 2, we learned how to identify false information in graphs. As you can see right here, we analyzed the percentages. In the false graph, the unemployment rate in the Clinton years was very high compared to the low unemployment rate during the Bush years. Well, when we altered the base of our graph and started it at 0, you can see that really the unemployment rates were very similar. This can be applied as over here also. You can see that these bowlers have more of a gap between their scores, but when you set the base to 0, it's more even. This shape keeps changing on me every time I open up on a different computer, but we were able to make these shapes using this graph. This section definitely taught me how to be more perceptive of information and data given to me. People can manipulate data to show a desired outcome, and it might not be true. So definitely be more perceptive of that, because you never know, you might just change one part of the graphing or the data and realize that the outcome is really not as it's aesthetically shown to the eye. Section number 3, unfortunately, I was doing this on a Chromebook. That's the last thing we're figuring out right now is Microsoft Office Online compared to the extended version and the Chromebook. The Chromebook can do everything else. I don't remember if it was Smart Art or Smart Graphs, but it was Smart one of those two. And that is the one thing that is still to be figured out. So the Venn diagram is part of the Smart Art, Smart Graphs. Number 4, this was probably the hardest section for me, but it was very good to learn. As you can see, we use range, median, mean, and also we talked about mode, but that's not exactly important. Okay, so as you can see, the standard deviation is a mathematical way to calculate the deviation for a group as a whole. That's a definition by its own. This is the amount by which a single measurement differs from a fixed value. The coefficient of variation is separate. It is also known as relative standard deviation. It is often a percentage used to show the ratio between standard deviation and mean. This means it's a measurement tool between standard deviation and the mean number, so it's used for those two. Here you can see the height of Army recruits in inches is pretty consistent compared to the more sporadic height of random people in mall by inches. This leads me to believe the height of Army recruits are most likely males close to the same age, whereas the height of random people in a mall, that could be people of all ages and all genders. So that's why those inches are more sporadic than the Army recruits. Section number 5, I like this section, really the transparency of the shapes because it made the graph look really well, but we also use standard deviation down here also, except we did an over time graph to analyze the sleep patterns of students. An interesting part of this section is, let's say I was doing a math equation in Excel and I wanted to click this 6.7 or this 2.03 and add it into my equation. Well, once it adds it into this equation, since these two numbers are in section D in Excel, it will add the letter D into the equation. This is a very important aspect of Excel we learned. You have to add the $ on either side of the letter to lock in your equation. This allowed us to repeat this equation down the page and thus get an overtime analysis of the data. Over here, you can see the slope. These are rectangles we made. Each rectangle was separate. The percentages are defined by, they're color-coded, you can see. We were able to make these shapes transparent, and this was very good for the graph because it allows us to still see the slope of the graph through the shapes. So this is important because we get to see the percentage, the slopes, and everything through these shapes, yet they give us a more visual example of where these percentages lie. In this sleep cycle, I actually fell about right here. So I could probably be one of the people that uses a little bit more sleep. Finally, this is the last section. This was my favorite section besides number 2. I felt like this section was very applicable to business standards today. I don't know what these shapes are, so I'm just going to call them snowflakes because that's what they look like to me. The blue snowflake, first off, this is Elon Musk's flamethrowers. So what we're calculating here is profit according to sales, so how many sales it takes to make a good profit margin. The blue snowflake is where we start. That's our base. We have no profit. We also have no loss of profit. Pretty self-explanatory. Our yellow snowflake is where we lose profit. I added the quote in here, to make money, you have to spend money. That's a common quote. I feel like it's very applicable to entrepreneurship. As you can see, we lost some money. That's okay. The profit drops a little bit after the initial investment, but then shortly after, the green snowflake shows where we break even. The break-even point is important because this shows any sales after the break-even point will be pure profit. This is where we finally made the money that we spent to start this endeavor, and now we're ready to make money. And then finally, the red snowflake shows pure profit down the line. So as you can see, Elon Musk, with the initial investment, you're going to lose a little bit of money, but if it's a good investment and has an idea that has diligence behind it, hopefully it'll bring profit in the end. Yes. So this is my Excel report. 6 and 2 are definitely my favorite. I also like the transparency of these graphs and being able to make those neat. And then, yeah, that's just the one thing is the smart graphs is something that still figuring out. But other than that, yep, this is the Excel report.